This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. Dispatches is also supported by the public affairs firm O'Donnell & Associates. For more information, check out o'donnellsolutions.com.
This episode is also brought to you by Citizens for Affordable Rates. New York's car insurance costs are nearly double the national average, and state lawmakers must take action to make driving more affordable. Learn more at citizensforaffordablerate.com.
But I also have to deal with the realities of the situation, which I've laid out before. So my friends follow me everywhere. So, Rebecca, we can talk offline, but we're looking at, I think, a lot more members.
Hey, bros, can you shut up? The reporters are trying to ask questions.
I've also declared war on potholes. So here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a WCNY podcast about power and politics in New York State government. And on this episode, we're exploring the potential of an upset in the Democratic primary for state comptroller, where incumbent Tom DiNapoli is facing his first challenge within the Democratic Party since he was appointed comptroller nearly 20 years ago. We'll talk with Parkside Group VP of Operations and Growth Alex Elmasri about the factors and conditions that might lead to an upset, and, spoiler alert, why you shouldn't necessarily bet the farm on one of the outsiders. But first, the votes are in for our Planet Albany Power Rankings, and my list was the favorite, no surprise there, with Raga Justin's in second and Assemblymember Josh Jensen's in a distant third. My favorite feedback on the lists included some of the following comments. Okay, but Liz Benjamin? Dave sucks. Bloomberg all the way. What's wrong with Josh's list? Is he okay? Josh's list is insane. Josh's picks are awful. He must have been doing a bit. And, my favorite, you were playing chess, Raga was playing checkers, and Jensen was playing pin the tail on the donkey while drunk. Thank you to everyone who voted, and thank you to Raga and Assemblymember Jensen for participating. Now here's our conversation with Alex Elmasri. So, I want to start with your experience, because I think of you as a state Senate guy, but have you ever been involved in a statewide campaign, either working one or consulting or following one particularly closely?
The answer is no. I think the closest I got to was a couple of years ago. There were some ballot amendments that DSCC got involved with that had to do with changing to the IRC and voting stuff.
Is that because the New York Democratic Party did not get involved?
That is correct. And the DSCC as a statewide organization did get involved. So that would be the only time. They did end up failing, but I think we spent a minuscule amount compared to the Republicans. I think we ended up spending like $200,000 on their many million. But yeah, that would be the only time we got involved.
Well, let's turn to our topic at hand, which is trying to game out how State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli might lose his stranglehold on the Democratic nomination, because right now, from my perspective, he is the front runner. He is the person who is going to win, but I don't want to be caught off guard. I want to imagine a world in which Tom DiNapoli does not win his, fifth term as comptroller. So you've graciously agreed to help, play a little game theory with us. And I want to start with this idea that nobody knows who the comptroller is. And that's not just they don't know the office, they don't know Tom DiNapoli. And the most recent polling suggests that only 20% of Democratic voters have a favorable opinion, 18% unfavorable, 62% don't know or no opinion about him, according to the latest Siena Research Institute poll. Is that somewhere for a candidate who is opposing DiNapoli, who will also have terrible favorable unfavorables because they're going to be completely unknown? Is that a place for them to start? Is that the beginning for that, case for the Drew Warshaws, Raj Goyals, or Adam Bunkadekos?
It is a place, but I think it's all a resource game at the end of the day, right? So if you have a bunch of resources and you can educate people on yourself, sure, but it's a statewide campaign, and statewide campaigns cost a lot of money, and it's not, no one is Googling who do I vote for to become the next comptroller. So you have to be in people's faces to get them to care. And this is where DiNapoli starts out with a strong advantage. There's going to be a certain segment of the population that's going to go, okay, my county committee has endorsed this person. I'm going to go with them, or I'm part of this union and we're with it. So he starts out with a base of folks. Drew Warshaw or any of these other people don't start out with any natural base. Every vote that they get is going to have to be earned through some, paid media or endorsement slate.
And you mentioned an endorsement slate. Last week, Drew Warshaw rolled out endorsements from state committee members, and these are not household names by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, the people on this list are not ones that I know and not names that I can pronounce, but is there any significance to that? I mean, in the 71st Assembly District in Manhattan, does Nobles Crawford, who I believe spoke at the convention for the idea of letting Drew Warshaw get onto the ballot, I mean, do these committee members hold some sort of local sway?
I think it's not so much about it impacting the vote directly. I think it's, when sometimes on campaigns in the beginning, you want to run the mirage of a campaign, I always say. Right, exactly. So does this open the door to maybe someone who can bring in more votes, a state legislative progressive, or someone who people will pay a little more attention to? Does that open the door for them to say, okay, now I can go and endorse Drew Warshaw or Raj, or, speak out against DiNapoli? Maybe that is the case here with these endorsements. But no, I don't think the east side of Manhattan is now swinging for Drew Warshaw because he got a couple committee members to be with him.
If I am trying to knock off an incumbent like DiNapoli, how important is it to have some sort of alignment with meaningful down ballot challengers, so that if there is somebody who's running for, say, Congress, Assembly, or Senate and is excited about voting for that person, they're also thinking, you know what, I'd also like to vote for this Drew Warshaw or Raj Goyal because they share the values with this person that I care about.
Look, if I was working on one of these campaigns, or in the future a theoretical campaign against an incumbent statewide elected official, I would say it's very important, especially the year that we are in New York City, where there are these open or competitive congressional races all across New York City, which has now led to open and competitive down ballot assembly seats, right? So there's a lot of organizing and attention being paid to Reynoso versus Valdez, or, on the Upper West Side in the Lasher Assembly seat, and then the CD12 seat. So people are going to be paying attention to those races because that's going to be the conversation. So to align with one of those candidates benefits you in a way where you don't have to spend as much on paid media, which is prohibitively expensive in the New York City media market. Stephen Fulop, when he was running for governor in Jersey, did this where he ran a full slate top to bottom, in the assembly and stuff there.
Right now we have this divided field of challengers, and I guess we'll see how it shakes out in the coming days in terms of petitions actually qualifying people to make the ballot. But if you assume there are 3 people looking to take out DiNapoli, my head would go toward this making things easier for DiNapoli because he just needs a plurality of the vote to win, and these challengers might cannibalize each other's votes. But do you see a world in which having multiple people potentially taking shots at the comptroller ultimately amplifies their message, it amplifies the critiques, the attacks against him, and thus people go out and look for alternatives potentially?
I do not see any argument for that, and would love your listeners to tweet in if they disagree. But I think, again, DiNapoli starts with a base of support among, county committee members, those who know who he is, unions, folks like that, and that's his base of support, and through paid media and campaigning, he'll only grow. They're just going to end up splitting the vote, and it doesn't matter how many press conferences they do beyond a very, very tuned in electorate. No one is gonna try to figure out what the comptroller does. There's just too many other things happening that people have to pay attention to politically. People might be interested in the person of Raj or Drew or Adam, but I still don't think the comptroller is something that they're going to go do a deep dive on their own time to try to figure it out.
You mentioned what the comptroller does, and one of the things that has been emphasized by all of the challengers is this idea of the expanded role of the comptroller's office above and beyond the way DiNapoli has used the office for nearly 20 years. And they've tried to make it about housing, for example. They've tried to seize on this office as one that focuses on housing, I think in large part given the narratives that we saw in the New York City mayor's race, where housing was such a big topic and we had the idea of a rent freeze. Do you think that is a winning strategy? I mean, given how limited the different topics are that you can message related to the comptroller's office, is that the best possible swing here? Or do you think they should be leaning into, I'm going to increase your pension returns and thus property taxes will go down? I mean, is there something else that you would be focusing on?
You already started putting me to sleep when you said pension returns.
Yeah.
So, I think whether winning strategy or not it is the only possible strategy to talk about the things that are top of mind for people right now, right? Whether that's international issues, whether that's utilities, whether that's housing, whether that's groceries, and connecting it to, tangentially to things that the comptroller does is the only way you're going to get people to pay attention. There's no question. And, if I think the jury's still out on if it works, my money is going to bet that it doesn't. But it is the only possible strategy to get there. And in theory, if you're running against an incumbent like DiNapoli, you want more people to vote for the comptroller than that have before, right? Because he's going to get his, again, I'm going to keep coming back to this natural base of supporters. And the way you bring those people into the fold is by talking about these issues, like you said, that Zoran did in his mayoral, but a lot of other people are talking about now as they're out in the primary campaign trail.
Fraud and lawsuit abuse are driving up car insurance costs for New Yorkers. Governor Hochul is proposing liability reforms to stop lawyers from gaming the system and help lower insurance prices. Florida made similar changes. Insurance costs are going down for most drivers, some up to 20%. But in Albany, Speaker Carl Heastie and Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins are still blocking reform. Why are they siding with the trial lawyer lobby against everyday New Yorkers? Visit keepnewyorkaffordable.org to learn more.
We saw in the mayoral primary last year that Andrew Cuomo had a lot of institutional support. It didn't necessarily translate, though, to a ton of support on election day. So is it possible that DiNapoli's institutional support won't actually translate into meaningful votes on primary day?
Of course it's possible. I think the key difference here is that Andrew Cuomo was a known entity with negative favorability ratings, right? So a lot of people went into, before any paid media started from anyone, negatively viewed him. To your point, not too many people know what the comptroller is, let alone Tom DiNapoli. In a weird way, that could be to his advantage as an incumbent, right? Incumbents fall eventually because people turn on them and they view them negatively over time. And it's, there's always the third term curse, right? Whether it's mayor or governor, it's just a lot harder because people start to get sour. The one thing you could say DiNapoli has going for him is that kind of no one really knows who he is. So he doesn't have these high negative favorable ratings that come with long-time incumbents, which does allow him to shape the narrative somewhat. Again, running a statewide race as comptroller is hard to do that, but no one's going to view him super negatively going into this.
The Working Families Party ultimately did not endorse a challenge to the governor from Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, and at least as of this recording, had not backed DiNapoli. I think when we talked with Jasmine Gripper, she said they just needed more time to figure out what they were going to do. Can a challenge to DiNapoli be successful without the Working Families Party?
Challenge could definitely be successful, but again, with
how? The WFP bring some bodies to it that I think they are really lacking. So I don't understand how they could potentially pull this off without, the WFP and the other affiliated groups with them.
Of course, but I think there's also a lot of other groups throughout the state that have popped up, and in the Hudson Valley you have For the Many, in New York City you have DSA, out on Long Island you have iSlip Forward. There are these groups throughout the state now that might follow WFP, but are also their own independent bodies as well, that people could align themselves with to get those bodies and that grassroots support.
But you don't anticipate DSA weighing in on this race at all, right? I mean, nobody passes the purity tests that they would have for an endorsement.
I will put a stake down and put $10 that DSA will definitely not be getting involved in the New York State Comptroller's race.
Are there any unknown variables that could pop up between now and middle of June that you think could alter this dynamic? Is there any sort of outside event that could shine a spotlight on this? I mean, if the stock market crashed worse than it has been recently, could that make people question something about pension returns? If there was some sort of scandal, is that have enough time right now to make a meaningful dent into DiNapoli's lead that we are perceiving here?
It's a good question. That's all outside of his control in theory, right? That's more of a Trump problem, which at the end of the day, I want to say, it probably helps DiNapoli more than anything because he can go blame Trump. But I think there's been some negative articles written about Raj out in the press, right? I haven't seen too many press hits on DiNapoli or Drew Warshaw. I assume over the coming months we will see kind of these campaigns shop around Oppo on each other. If there is some big scandal, again, the way you go against an incumbent is you try to make their favorability ratings more poor, right? So if there are a bunch of stories written about DiNapoli, he mishandled this thing and this is how it negatively affected you, that could be something that, changes the race. I think it would have to be fairly groundbreaking and an earthquake to shift my opinion that he is not the front runner. But again, nothing has come out negatively against Drew Warshaw either. And I'm sure, just the DiNapoli or another campaign will be circulating those, try to circulate those stories as well.
Governor Hochul has a plan to crack down on fraud and lower car insurance costs. But Assembly and Senate leaders oppose it, siding with trial lawyers against their constituents. If Albany is serious about affordability, prove it. Visit keepnewyorkaffordable.org.
Do you think Drew Warshaw is pretty clearly the only alternative to DiNapoli with a viable chance? And when I say viable chance, I mean like me taking a 3/4 shot in a basketball game with, I don't know, Loren standing in front of me?
I think that he is definitely the front runner among the challengers.
And what is it about either the way he is campaigning or his profile that makes him the front runner or the best worst option besides DiNapoli?
He seems to be running the most organized campaign, I would say, number one. Number two, we talked about it earlier. He's rolling, whether these are not groundbreaking endorsements, but he seems to be rolling out endorsements across the state. He did show up, not that it made a big difference, but he did show up to the state Democratic convention, gave a speech.
Adam was there too.
Oh, I did miss Adam. Sorry, Adam. But he seems to be running the most organized and, campaign across the state, I would say, not just showing up and doing kind of media stunts, which is kind of one pillar of a campaign, but he also seems to be running an organized race and raising the money as well.
If you were some of those progressive groups that we talked about earlier that have not weighed in on this race other than the DSA, from a strategy perspective, do you think it makes the most sense for them to try to aggressively back a challenge to DiNapoli to get their agenda through? Or do you think they take sort of the 2018 WFP and Cuomo approach and try to negotiate some concessions or policy guarantees from DiNapoli because he is likely to be the victor. Does that make the most sense to try to use this leverage right now?
I think the latter is probably the thing that makes the most sense, and that's also because again there is so much happening on the congressional and state level, and you only have so much bandwidth among your organization and among your rank and file to influence things. And if you are more likely to win challenges on the assembly level or the congressional level, that just makes way more sense to do than with the comptroller, number one. And number two, the challenge to DiNapoli is most likely unsuccessful. So better to go get a couple concessions and call it a win.
You worked for the Senate Democrats both when they were in the minority and majority, and I'm using that term kind of broadly because you worked on the government and campaign side of things. And I'm curious if you have any sympathy for the challengers in this race and their attempt to get press coverage, given your experience with the Senate Dems pre-majority when they had tons of ideas and tons of positions that they were trying to get out there and might have struggled to get attention from the media. So do you have any sympathy there? Do you feel a kindred spirit at all? Or did you spend so much time in the majority that you're like, screw it?
I always will go for the underdog, even if, I'm not with them actually. But I have no sympathy because now they have matching funds and are able to run multi-million-dollar races on the statewide level, which is something, we always struggle for fundraising when we are in the minority. And matching funds has changed that game. Look, I do not think you have these races at this level without matching funds. And then money drives a lot in politics. And there's a reason the press is also paying more attention to these folks because they can run real races. If Drew Warshaw was out there with $25,000 raise, I don't think anyone would be giving him as much the light of day. So I think the matching funds program fundamentally changes these races. And I don't even think we're at the point of it being realized yet. I think, 4 years from now, we might even see more of this on the statewide level.
Lastly, I don't think these challengers are going to be successful, and I think that any pretty objective review when these campaigns were launched would say this is not a winning proposition. So if people are approaching this with a rational sense of things, I wonder if they have ulterior motives with these runs, whether they're looking at a longer game, like trying to get on people's radar now, either for another comptroller run 4 years from now or running for some other sort of office. Is that something that we should be thinking about with these candidates, with Drew, Raj, and Adam? Is there a potential that this is a way to expand their profile for something else, either in the short term or long term?
Maybe. I mean, look, I think we are in a moment now in politics where if there was one challenger, there is no question people are upset with incumbents from both parties across the political spectrum.
At least the ones they know.
Right, exactly. The ones they know. So I don't want to say like anyone is doing this race just for an ulterior motive, right? So I think there is anyone who's challenging incumbent now is reading the tea leaves that voters are upset with anyone who's in power. Is there limited downside because you can go with matching funds, get your name out there, and possibly run a respectable race? And then when something else opens up, you immediately become, maybe if not the top candidate for that seat, a viable person, whether it's a congressional seat or, statewide race 4 years from now. Yes, it all helps if you run a respectable race and come out of it more known than you were going in.
Yeah, I mean, you could theoretically take your matching funds, spend all the money in like one congressional district in the state or one assembly district in the state, one Senate district, and then 2 years from now, they'll be like, I don't know what he was running for. I don't even know why I know the name, but Raj Goyal, maybe he should be my city council member or something like that.
Yes, you could do that. Do I think these people are doing that? No.
Do you think candidates have done that in the past in the New York City matching system? Because I've always wondered why some people like run for city comptroller over and over again just to come in like fifth place.
You and me.
Well, we've been speaking with Alex Elmasri. He is a vice president of some sort at Parkside?
At some firm.
I'm gonna get it right on the actual outro.
Vice president of operations and growth at the Parkside Group.
Alex, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't know if you saw the Sperminator is running against Andrew Hevesy.